There you go.
All right.
All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. No public?
No, we did not have any requests for to join the meeting.
Okay, and so we'll move on to approve the minutes from January 11th. So anybody that would like to move to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
We need a vote.
All in favor, raise your hand.
There you go. Electronic, okay, good.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
you've done it. There you go.
So I guess our first item on the agenda is the review of the affordable housing incentives reports.
Kelly, that's yours. Do you need control of the? I'll make you co-host if you need control. Give me 1 second, please. Make co-host. Yes. Okay, you should have control to share your presentation, Kelly.
Give me just a sec. I'm looking for all the buttons. We do everything at the city in Teams, so this is a switch. Share screen.
You didn't hear from Crystal or Martha, right?
I did not.
All right, can everyone see that screen? The presentation?
Yes.
Yes, okay, perfect. All right. Well, everyone, my name is Kayleen Whaley. I am with the Housing Community Investment Division here at the City of Longmont. I appreciate you guys making time to have us come and share this information with you. This is a continued conversation from, started talking about this about a year ago when we came and shared the housing needs assessment and the suggested changes to our inclusionary housing program. We received a grant and we had Group Policy do a bunch of this research for us. And we were fortunate enough to have a little bit of money left in the grant. And so we asked them to take a further deep dive into our affordable housing incentives, kind of give us a look of what industry best practices are, what we might be able to do to make any changes if necessary, and just check on the overall health of our city's incentive program. All right, so just as kind of a reminder, the City of Longmont already has a very robust inclusionary housing incentive program. So we have baseline incentives and we have enhanced incentives. So our baseline incentives are going to be for developers that are meeting that inclusionary housing requirement, that 12% requirement on site. And then the enhanced incentives are going to be for those developments that are doing more than 12%. So those are going to be your projects that are doing, 20, 50, 100% affordable whole developments. And then something just to keep in mind as we're talking tonight, all of these suggestions from Root are going to only be available to developers that are doing on-site affordable units. So with our program, you can do fee in lieu and land donation, and we have a couple of these different options. If any of the developers chose to meet this requirement through those other options, they could not get any of these incentives that we currently have or any of the ones that Root is proposing. So we're just trying to incentivize and encourage more affordable housing here in Longmont through this discussion. So there was a detailed report provided to you guys in a packet, and what you'll see is the way Root conducted this research is they started with looking at developer feedback and getting feedback from city staff on just how our incentives are working and how they're being utilized. Then they did a deep dive into a feasibility analysis and looked at ways to quantify how our incentives are impacting actual projects. And then they looked at nationwide best practices, and they compiled all of this information for us and provided some recommendations. So this first slide is looking at the stakeholders' perceptions. And the biggest key takeaway I took from this is that our existing land use incentives allow developers to build the developments that they want to build and that they feel the market supports, but it lessens a developer's need for incentive and variances in order to produce what they want to produce. This is an incredibly high complement to our land use code and how it functions, where it speaks volumes to how pro-development we are. But it does shine light that there's places for us to tweak those incentives in order to actually further our affordable housing goals. They of course always come up with some other suggestions that they're looking for. So of course they threw out, parking ratios and increased density and more financial incentives to help them. But the biggest thing was they're getting what they need, and that's fantastic. And so they're not as incentivized to do affordable housing. All right. So the big feasibility analysis that you'll see in the report is a really deep dive pro forma that really does quantify how the incentives are impacting the overall production, like project costs. Root did a really good job of this image here of a multi-story building. And what you can see from here, the percentages of funds that are spent on different types of costs that you have when you're trying to build a multifamily apartment building. So there's hard costs and soft costs. You got to buy the land. There's money required to get construction financing. And then there's costs around parking. And so what this analysis showed is that while our incentives are meaningful, particularly like the fee waivers and the fee reductions that help with the soft cost and hard costs and even the land costs, the biggest one that's in our control as a regulatory agency is how much parking we require. That has the ability right now, it's 3% of the total project costs go to parking. And if we tweak that incentive in some way, we might be able to see that 3% drop down to 1% and make a pretty good impact on a project. So then Root went out and looked at best practices, and they came back with some improvements, recommended improvements. So they have administrative improvements in one category. And so when we're talking about those, we're talking about process-related improvements. What is the city's process, and how is that process and the way that it's designed impacting the ability of a developer to get a building permit through the system, basically. So they gave us 3 recommendations in this category. Develop a fast-track review process, look at our public notice type processes, and streamline ADU approval. So the fast-track process is actually something that our office is already working on. We have applied and made a commitment to the state's Proposition 123 funds. And a caveat of getting access to those funds is you have to have a fast-track review process set up in your city by 2027.
Kenny, can I stop you there for a second?
Yeah.
Does everybody know what Proposition 123 is?
I don't.
Can you talk a little bit about Prop 123?
Yes, but I don't totally understand it yet. It's one of those wonderful things that DOLA is created while designing it. They're offering it at the same time as designing it. So it is state available funding dedicated to affordable housing, and jurisdictions can have access to these funds to use for a variety of things. But you have to make a commitment to increase the number of affordable units you produce each year. And they were able to come up with a number. So Longmont, in order to have access to these funds over the next 3 years, we have to agree to build 100 units a year of deed restricted affordable housing.
So let me give them a little more higher level background.
Yeah,
so Proposition 123 was voted in by the Colorado voters about 2 years ago. So you all voted for it. It takes, I think, if my memory serves right, it's 1/10 of 1% of the TABOR refunds that comes from that. And last I heard, I don't know exact number, last is around $300 million a year. And to Kelly's point, it's being administered by DOLA, and I think DOH is also involved, the Department of Housing. And it can be used for development. It can also be used for services. So for example, for supportive services for housing, it can be used for that. It can also be used for homelessness services as well. There are certain percentages, I don't remember exact how the breakdown is, but it is, it's, you know, it is being built, and it's being designed as it's being built, but it is a voter mandated, voter elected bill, and as table refunds go up, so potentially the funds that are available. So just wanted to give them a big picture of what Prop 123 is.
No, I think that's great, because I would hope that this board would attempt to leverage some of those funds for various things that were allowed. I know our office will leverage it for, you know, building affordable units in various ways. So we're already looking at a fast track process, which is a part of that requirement to get access to those funds. So in that, we have to have that in place by 2027. So we'll be back to talk about that a lot more in the next few years. The next recommendation was a public process requirement. So when you are building a development that has more than 4 lots, you're required to do a process called the preliminary plat process. And this has a number of public notice type requirements. So, and so Ruth's recommendation is to kind of look at that and see if there's any way we can modify that process. And it could save anywhere between 6 and 7 months of time on the overall timeline it takes to get a development through the permit process. And then the last one is to streamline our ADU approval. Right now, to be able to build an ADU, you need to do a site plan approval, which is really just a bunch of departments in the city looking at the land use requirements and if that's an allowed use on that site that the ADU is proposing. So there's a talk about looking at it to be an administrative process where it's approved and it just goes into the building permit process. So those are things that Ruth's recommending we kind of explore.
Go ahead.
Any discussion around pre-approved ADU plans, which other cities are doing?
So totally off topic, but this definitely answers your question. So in 2019, my office paid for stock ADU plans, and we have them readily available. No one has used them. There are
Interesting, okay.
five stock approved plans ready to go. They're on my laptop right now. Any developer can have access to them, or any homeowner. They just haven't been used. So we're hoping that some changes my hope is that the changes to the streamlined approval process might actually encourage some people to actually reach out for those stock plans, but we have them. So.
Okay, do you think that's an issue of outreach to homeowners? I guess the question is, you know, are homeowners so far down the process to creating an ADU that by the time they learn about your potential, it's a little too late for them? They've already done some of the work. I'm just wondering.
It could be, but the biggest hurdle that I see because I do some of the ADU review, the biggest hurdle I'm seeing around ADU review ends up being the parking requirements that an ADU has. So if you have a single family home that has a number of parking spaces that are required, and then you're going to add an ADU and have more tenants there, that requires a certain number of parking spaces, and that can get a little difficult. It could be an outreach problem, Aliberto. The plans got approved right before COVID, right around that time. So it could be a little bit of that. But it's ADUs are getting traction right now. So maybe those stock plans will start to get used.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
What does that acronym stand for?
ADU, accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
And so think about like an apartment over the garage, or, you know,
A mother-in-law
like that.
suite.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you for asking, Brenda. It's good that we say what the acronym is.
So
All right,
all these
so-
are recommendations that they would have to, the council would still have to approve these changes.
Absolutely.
Right?
Correct, yes.
Yes. So the other recommendations that Ruth gave, and there's quite a few of them, are around code improvements. So rules that we have within our existing code that we could probably tweak and they think could result in incentivizing more affordable housing. So the first one is open space variance. So when you have a residential development next to a park or open space, there is a buffer requirement. This is traditionally like a landscaped area that separates the residential development from the park or open space. Nothing can be built there. And so Root's actually recommending that we look at either adjusting the size of that buffer or just eliminating it altogether, in the hopes that we then would be able to use that little section of land to maybe put more units on. So it's something to explore. Utilities and access easements. So each utility in a development, we're talking water, sewer line, each need a certain amount of feet on either side of that water or sewer line, that nothing can be there. They just need that spacing. So Root's recommendation is to kind of look at those spacing requirements and see if there's any way we could tweak it or stack the utilities differently. Alejandro, you had a question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
More of an opinion on the landscaping between open space, and I would not like to see that go away. And then I know from working as a utilities person in waste collection and distribution, there's space needed for safe working, safe working environment.
Absolutely.
That's intentionally kept there for that specific reason, and also for the safety of the property, so the private property. So that's why there's like certain easements that require that spacing. So just
yeah, you're absolutely right. There are definitely reasons behind why you need to have different types of utility easements, and one of those is the safety of workers that might be messing with those utility lines at various points. This suggestion is really just to kind of look to see if we're duplicating, like if we're having too much space in some ways. I think it's something we'll definitely work in partnership with Public Works to hear their opinions on. It's not something I'm super well versed in, but yes, there are definitely safety concerns to consider.
Kayleen, Alejandro makes a good point. So, when this goes before council, so Alejandro shared his opinion about the open space piece. Are these going to be looked at individually so that, so they can have that conversation and council can have that, those discussions around specific incentive recommendations, or is this going to go in as an entire packet?
So the direction from council, because we did present this to council on Tuesday night, and I was going to get there with the slides a little bit, but the recommendation is that we come back with either program or code suggestions. And then the plan is we have a meeting scheduled in about 2 weeks, as multiple departments touch these suggestions, to kind of create a 2024 work plan, because there's a lot of stuff to look at and a lot of code changes and decisions and details to work out. So we need to decide as departments that are impacted by this, which ones we want to work on first and which we think will make the biggest impact.
Thank you.
They talked about reducing parking standards as well, which the feasibility analysis kind of supports. So adjusting parking in some way. They recommended to not adjust our density or height bonuses. The market is supporting what we're offering right now. So they told us to leave that one alone. And then the last two, this is called the high density exemption. Internally, we refer to this as the density cap incentive in the IH program. And so the way this one works is if you're doing a development that is denser than 20 units per acre, the 12% requirement is only applied to the first 20 units in that development. And
do everyone know what IH stands for? IHO? It's Inclusionary Housing Ordinance.
Yes. So what Root found was that the market conditions today have changed versus when this incentive was put into place in 2018. And we no longer need to incentivize density the same way that we did years ago. And so the recommendation is to either adjust this to a higher rate where the IH is applied to maybe the first 35 units or more, or just to remove this incentive altogether. And the chart here on the page shows the impact of units not generated because of this incentive. And then the last
So-
one, go ahead.
Could you help me understand, so just so that yeah, just this, could you help us understand, so let's do a hypothetical, developers building 100 units. They would only be required to meet the 12% on the
The
first 20.
So yeah, so
Oh,
let's
I
say,
didn't know that.
yeah, it's one of the developers, especially these high density ones that are doing really big apartment buildings. They love this incentive. So, and this is how it plays out. So you can see here in this chart that this is actually 7 projects that were approved, and we did over the last 5 or 6 years. So if we have 115 units, we take project 4, they had enough density that they only had to provide me 4 IH units. If,
Oh, wow.
yeah, if they didn't have this incentive available to them, they would have had to provide me 14 IH units. And so these are deed restricted affordable units.
So we've been losing out units, and I see, I don't have to sign up as well. It sounds like we've been losing out on units because we had this exemption.
Yeah,
It-
it made sense in 2018 when density was not a popular thing, and the housing crisis, I don't think was as publicized as it is now. And so developers weren't willing to build dense developments. And they claimed they couldn't do it, but the market now supports really dense development, so we can absolutely still ask for the full requirement without them pulling the project out, is what this shows. Alejandro,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to voice my opinion on this. I agree
Yeah.
with this, removing this incentive. Yeah, that's an outrage.
Yeah,
Only
again,
4 units? No.
yeah, it made sense at the time. Totally got why we did it at that time, but I am in support of us looking at removing it as well. Primary use and mixed use, the primary use rule in mixed use districts is the last one. So this one is in a mixed use district. You're going to traditionally see a development that's got commercial space downstairs and residential upstairs. Okay. The rule in Longmont is that if you have that scenario, 51% of the space in that building has to be designated for commercial space, and the remaining 45% can be used for a secondary use. And secondary uses can be beyond residential. There's other options, but the most common you see is residential. So this suggestion is having us look at maybe lowering that percentage of commercial space that's required if you're doing on-site affordable units, or just even allowing, if you're doing 100% affordable, just allowing that no commercial space at all. So that's that's what they mean by a use by right in the language here. So these are all the different things we get to explore. And so, as I mentioned, we brought this to council on Tuesday night, had this very similar conversation, and the direction was for us to return with proposals and amendments. And we are going to meet as a big multiple department team and kind of make a priority list. And then we're more than happy in HCI to come back and share with you guys which ones ended up being the priority. Any other questions?
I'm curious about the,
Oh, hold on, who was that?
is that Martha?
Was that Martha? Was that you, Martha?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm just curious about the public process requirements. Would that public process be dropped entirely? And it would just be an administrative review, or would there still be an opportunity for public input for larger?
Yeah. So this ended up being kind of a council discussion that I had last night. I think we'll explore as a staff what it would look like and what the impacts would be to maybe losing one or two of those public improvement requirements versus removing all of them. I think we'll just provide a plethora of options, but even the mayor mentions how she just felt a little uneasy removing the public process entirely, that citizens wouldn't be happy with that. And that makes sense. I think it's more about just tweaking it a little bit. I mean, I think it's got 3 or 4 different types of public hearing processes. And that can be quite a bit. You know, maybe we bring it down to 1 or 2. Yeah, but great question.
I mean, it is an interesting item because, like, I live in low income housing. They do not have assigned parking spaces. So, like, during the holiday time, it's like we have to really be selective about when we go out because we may not have a place to park when we come back. So to make it like more dense,
Or to eliminate parking altogether.
yeah, like that's just wild to me.
Yeah.
We're already crammed in here.
So yeah, so I think there's
That's
a
a great
couple,
point.
it's a great point. There's some.
Welcome to New York.
Right. The transportation planner and I were talking about this, about what this might look like. And I think it'll be more of like a suggestion to either reduce the parking requirement and or eliminating the parking requirement. But the market naturally is still going to dictate that there needs to be some level of parking, because you're not going to want to go buy a house or rent an apartment and not have any parking options. We require a lot of spaces generally in Longmont. So it's looking at tweaking that a little bit and letting the market dictate how much parking actually is there.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, and I'll make a comment on the parking as well. I mean, if the developer put a multi-unit complex in my neighborhood, and I mean, it's an older neighborhood, but and if you reduce the parking, and I see a lot of families, I mean, you got 2 people live in an apartment, or 3, you got a husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, and maybe there's a kid. As they get older, so you might definitely need 2, maybe 3 parking spots. And then if you're living in an older neighborhood, I mean, I just see a lot of cars parking in front of my yard, and it's just going to be a lot of chaos. You're adding a lot of stress and anxiety to the residents that are here, including those who are in these new developments with limited parking.
Would eliminating the parking in certain zoning districts feel less of a burden onto the homeowner? I'm thinking if maybe reducing the parking, if it's within a half a mile of a transit line, where there's another option besides just doing a car. We don't have to apply, we're open to suggestions. We don't have to apply parking reductions to everything. It's a good thought though. I will keep that in mind.
I got a comment on that, but I think Graham has his hand up, but I have a comment on that.
Thank you for explaining all of this. I appreciate all your work. I want to challenge this idea that the market will make any kind of assistance or dictation for folks, especially when it comes to low income housing. I don't think there's many options available. And so people aren't going to be like, oh, I don't get a parking spot, I'm going to go somewhere else. Like, there's no choice, right? There's already not enough available as it is. So people are going to grab whatever they can, especially if it's permanently affordable for the AMI that they're looking for. So I would just say, if you're talking about like chips on a shelf at the grocery store, yeah, people have a choice. But when you're talking about low income housing, I don't think the market's going to make any correction in that regard. I think people just will have to park on streets nearby and walk, and then it's going to cause a burden on the developer to get a plan approved, because we all know that when somebody proposes a development for low income housing, the neighborhood is in an uproar and they don't want it in their neighborhood, and then all of a sudden pushing people further away from public transit, right, which is central in these central old town areas where you get bus lines. And I don't know, it's a complicated issue. So I'm not pretending to know and understand it. I just want to say that removing parking is going to remove parking, and is not going to it's going to cause a lot of problems, I think. And I would say, if we're looking for 1 or 2 points to incentivize developers, I think it should come out of the city's budget. I think the building department should waive fees. I think there should be help with permit costs and city tap costs and all the utility and infrastructure fees that the city levies.
Yeah, so I am looking down because I'm taking notes, so I hear your guys' concern and around parking and how we apply it, I guess, how we go about reducing it. So I do hear that, and the concern that the market won't just naturally take care of it, and especially in low income housing. So I do hear those concerns. And then Graham, I just wanted,
Oh, go ahead,
Graham,
sorry, finish, Kenny. Go ahead and finish.
okay, sorry. Graham, really quick, just because I don't know if you actually come and talked about the level of financial incentives that the city is already offering. So we waive for sale, low income developments. So 80% AMI or below. We waive 100% of the city development fees. So that's the water tap fees, the building permit fees, all of it. I take it all off.
That's just for those units though. So if it's 4 out of 100, you're going to waive, 4% of those fees. Is that right? Or
Yeah, it's applied. It's applied to the specific building permit. But for sale
Yep.
right now there's only a few developers that can do for sale. So it ends up being like an entire habitat project. We just take them all away. And then on the rental side, we end up taking the highest we can take away is 50% of all of those development fees. And a lot of those fees do have to be repaid to Public Works. So then this office uses that fee in lieu revenue to then pay back Public Works so that they can still operate and provide the services that they have to provide, even though they're not making a revenue. So yeah, so we're trying to find things that, because we do so much of that already, we're trying to find other little tweaks that we can do on top of that. Yeah. So I just wanted to share that because I don't know if we've ever talked about it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Alejandra, did you?
Well, can I make my statement first before you?
Yeah.
It's a good conversation we're having. So I think the statement I would make about this is I think I totally agree and understand the parking issue, and I think that there is within the city of Longmont, in particular the transportation department, that commitment to make us more multimodal, right? To reduce the use of the car, right? And I think that there's kind of this tension, right, with the philosophy from the city departments on, that's why they're doing that whole big project on Terry, I believe it's Terry, that corridor, right? So I think that just to keep that in mind, that there's also a desire from our planners to reduce the need of car, make the city more multimodal, more walkable, more public transport. And so I think that that's also a reality to keep in mind. So I just wanted to say that. Sorry, Alejandro.
Yeah. Alexander.
Oh, there we go. Mute button. That would be great. That would be a great relief. Expanding our public transportation, making more accessible streets, more accessible for bikes, e-bikes, scooters.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the NIMBY effect, it's gonna happen. People are, single family homes are not gonna like to see a strange parked car in front of their house, but the reality is it's a public street and anyone can park there. It's not a set parking spot for your house. But I understand coming from also owning, or at least I owned one in Miami. That's right. Yeah. But I rented one here, a single family home, and it was weird to look out the window and see a car that wasn't mine parked in front of my house. But what are you gonna do? It's a public street. But yeah, I think the public transportation, that expansion, especially expanding towards the southeast side of Longmont, that would be great. I mean, I'd find it odd that we don't have a bus that takes you to the new hospital. That's weird. Yeah, that's very weird. And there's also job opportunities on that side of the town that certain folks can't get to because they can't drive. Either they don't have vehicles or they're restricted, and they cannot drive a vehicle. So you got the whole plant over there, Schmuckers. You got the new climbing facility that they just built. There's like a untapped employment opportunity for a big section of our community and our society that they're not exploiting because they don't have the opportunity to get there. Anyways,
Oh.
yeah, I think that will relieve a
Mhm.
huge thing. Parking, I'm sorry, Martha. That sucks. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a good trade-off. Like Graham was saying, you don't have the option, but we have affordable housing. If I need affordable housing, I'm driving just one car. I'm biking everywhere, you know what I mean, to get inside. So, yeah.
I think these are great points, and we are not going to design any of this in a vacuum. So we are going to work with people who are bigger subject matter expert on parking standards than I am, or open space and utility easements, and get input from them before we pitch a plan to council.
So my other question, Kelly.
Yeah, I just want to make another comment on transportation. Because I think council been trying to make improvements on transportation for years and nothing's happened, and they have funds, but still nothing's happened, or the design is not working properly. What I see, if you can reduce parking, a couple ideas that I would have, and I think Alejandro mentioned one, is I've seen some people use electric bikes. So that'd be one way if they can get around town. I don't know if they can go shopping, get groceries very easily. But my other option that I use today is Uber. So I would use an Uber driver if I didn't have a place to park my car and I couldn't afford a car, can pay the taxes on it, and so I would probably use an Uber. So that would be my option if I had to do affordable housing.
So I did read in the Times Call, and I'm sorry, I don't know more about it, but Longmont is looking at a Uber type service that they're gonna institute hopefully this summer. I would recommend you take a look at the Times Call and research that article. I just don't know enough about it to talk deeply about it, but I did read that article. Did I hear somebody else? Was that you, Martha?
It was it was more so I just hope that people make considerations for the layeredness involved in what a public housing is, because even today I spent 3 hours with a mom in the ER with her kiddo, and I had to drive her there because there was no bus access. But even more so, the reality is so many of the parents who get Section 8 are single parents. So having to even carry groceries blocks away from, if you have the luxury of a car, in addition to holding your kids, people already have a hard enough issue and I can also see apartments, I would guarantee that this apartment would start to charge for the spaces, which when you're already check to check or low income, that's going to be a problem. So I just hope that the creativity is not just for the builders, but also for the people who will be living in these homes.
That's an excellent point, and that's the lens that my office does try to have to think about. Especially, we're very blessed here in Longmont to work so closely with our housing authority, so we start to see and experience firsthand from people coming to talk to us about what they're experiencing, and we definitely try to keep that in mind. So this will be a very collaborative process, with us keeping in mind the impacts to people's lives that these changes can make.
Thank you, Kayleen. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I'd have one more comment on the developer side of, because I see some of the numbers there. I think the rent was $1,800. And I guess if you have four units, I guess they're affordable. They're probably less than that. So the rents for a 1 or 2 bedroom is going to be around $1,800. And then if you do have affordable units in there, I'm just hoping the quality of those people in there are good. Because I'm a landlord, but I've seen people using drugs. And I just seen the housing, they had some contamination. And someone was smoking meth and it contaminated their property and it's kind of the cost was on them. And I kind of seen the numbers where maybe the profit they're making is 300,000 a year for 48 units. And if you have multi-story and all those units from the bottom up are contaminated, it can take your whole profit or your income for the whole year. So I'm gonna sympathize for developers if they have to deal with this because insurance will not cover them. And it's all on the developer, they have to pay for it. So that's another reality in Longmont. And because basically, I think drug dealers with fentanyl, I think there was somebody got arrested with 30 pounds. They got put on probation. So just don't do it again, don't do it again, but if they're not being punished, it should be like in Florida where they should be, if you do something, you should be in prison for multiple years, but not in Longmont. It's just don't do it again. So there is risk out there in this community.
Alejandro, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanna, on that note, express that drug usage and substance use disorder, it's in every level of society. So just to be careful not to stigmatize people in low income, or people that need low income housing, with that stigma of they're the only ones using. This usage goes from the wealthy down to the poor to the homeless. It's everywhere. So just want to be careful just want to make sure that we're careful with not stigmatizing the people that are in need for low income housing.
I just had a question about our role. It's I think this is a really interesting conversation. I've learned a lot. Is this just an educational opportunity or do we end up voting on certain recommendations by the root company? What role do we play as an advisory board?
So that's a great question. Go ahead. Okay.
I was gonna punt it to you to ask you what has traditionally been their role. I think this one resulted in a timing, like your guys' board meeting came after, just happened to fall after we had to go to council with this. So I don't think we had an opportunity at this time to make this anything but a learning, like a educational informal experience.
Yeah.
So
So many times what the role of this board has played is, prior to this going to council, the board gets to review this and provide guidance to HCI on these reports and these recommendations. Like you are now, you're giving your thoughts and suggestions for them to consider. Ultimately, you are an advisory board. You're not a governing board. So the most you can do is recommend, advise, and then send on to council, because really it's council who is the governing board that makes, that will take these recommendations and whatever the departments create and approve them, or give, leadership the go ahead to implement them. Your job is to take this education, provide your own, just like Martha and Alejandro and Michael have done, provide your own life experience, and then, give staff direction.
Stop sharing.
Kelly, do you have any more slides or can we stop sharing?
we can stop sharing.
Okay.
Let me give this back.
So you all, in this case, like Kayleen said, timing was just not, but if timing was right, Kayleen would have presented, you would have accepted the report, you would have provided your recommendations to, give guidance to council or whatever, to staff. And then they would have taken it to council, and again, ultimately it's council who approves. And for a lot of things that this board does, that's how it works, is you all provide direction to staff. And then, if it's something that needs to go to council, we take your input. And work with it into our reports and then. Take it to council. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. But given that our meeting occurred after the council meeting Tuesday night, is this something that we continue to talk about and provide feedback on, or is this a one-time conversation?
No. So we're looking at 10 code updates, 10 major code updates. So we can't do this all in a year. So we're going to be talking a lot. What I can't tell you is which one we're going to come back with yet. I need to have that meeting with all the departments and we get to duke it out. Which one's the priority, which one we think is going to make the biggest impact. And then we're going to come and talk to you guys. We'll probably have a couple different options or ways we're going to do this. We'll get your input and then we'll take something to council. So yes, we'll talk a lot more. Graham.
Yeah, can I just encourage staff when they're considering which one to tackle first is to identify which would have the biggest impact. And so, I mean, it's obviously a huge priority for housing based on all the needs assessments as we've done. And so I guess that would be my encouragement is just pick the one or two that's going to make just the hugest impact on getting the highest volume of affordable housing encouraged.
So my pitch right now, and this is Kayleen Whaley's opinion, the two that I think will make the biggest impact, right? Like we'll see impact right away is going to be that high density exemption, you know, requiring 12% to those high residential developments, that one. And then the public process one. So looking at that public process with preliminary plats, especially on our affordable housing projects that are doing 100% affordable, they're usually having to hire a consultant to run those neighborhood meetings. And that ends up being a cost they actually come to our office to ask for help with. And so even just taking one of those down, where there's only two instead of maybe four, that can help allow them to put money towards maybe another unit or something. So just the little tweaks that might make pretty substantial impacts. Yeah, so those will be my first two pitches. But I'm not the deciding factor. Does anyone have a preference on which one we tackle first or a suggestion?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. I agree on the high density exemption. It seemed like when that was presented early in the conversation, it was obvious that needed to be updated. The market's so different today than it was in 2018. So I agree. That's low hanging fruit. I'm excited to talk more about the public process. I also know that in the grand scheme of things, the trust in local governments is extremely low right now. And any kind of development that may be unconventional or out of the norm can create a lot of controversy. And giving the public the time to understand why that's being proposed and the benefit it provides to the community is valuable. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about, you know, how it's done today and why and what the unintentional consequences are of lessening that public process.
One of the common things I see with that public process is that if a developer's calling our office and they're interested in a parcel of land, but it's something that's going to require a number of public process like conversations, it spooks them because of the resistance. And then they may not actually move forward with developing anything on that site. Because there's a risk of it not being favorable. There's a risk that the bank just won't like the possibility of the neighborhood impact on their thing. So it's not that we don't want public opinion. I think there's so much value in public opinion on things. It's how do we find that balance? Because those things are kind of conflicting, right? Because we still want the development. So how do you balance that? So again, tweaking maybe how many that are required is, I think, that maybe the direction. I'm not sure yet. So, but no, those are very good points. Any other ones that you guys want to see maybe looked at first? Okay, perfect. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I'll let you have the rest of your meeting back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
The updated work plan draft.
Right, yeah, I intentionally put draft, where is it, is this it?
That one, then scroll down.
I'm gonna share the screen, this is not a final product, we usually vote on it in March to finalize it, by the end of the first quarter, we want it finalized, but wanted to just. Bring this. Like,
Go over more.
where do I go there? There, alright, I'm gonna share. My screen. Here we are, can everybody see that?
Good to go.
Alright, so. We've done minutes. We've done. This, and hopefully you all have a chance to, you can still continue to look at the report after we did include the entire report in the packet for you all to review. And I will say this, if you all have any other questions after you take some time with this, feel free to reach out to Kayleen or she, we can send you, if you don't have her contact info, we can get you her contact info if you all have any further questions. Yeah, the entire report is here. So the things that are highlighted are the things that we've added, don't get to this, and again, ultimately, this is just kind of to check in with you all and. Make sure that we're, going on the right direction, and then we'll bring a final back in March. So like tonight, we're gonna talk about, I'm gonna show you some pictures of our lean process that we started and give you some updates. These are some of the things, I wanna do a logic model training, but that may change, because some things have actually come up because of the work that you all started, and I want to talk a little about that, so we may change that one before the end of March. Is there any other training that this group would be interested in, I guess, is part of the work plan question. Of course, we'll go over the application and we'll talk about that here in a second. But I just want to check in to see if there's any other training that this group is interested in for this year. To delve in, so like I said, we're gonna talk about logic models. It'll probably happen outside of a board meeting, and I'll talk more about it, because we have something in mind. But anything else that you all be interested in? And if not, that's okay.
I have one idea, and it may not be a good one, but there were, I think, 7 different projects that were highlighted in the last report. They talked about a different amount of affordable units that were associated with each. And maybe this is just my second meeting, so maybe other advisory board members are familiar with those. But if someone were to sit down and walk us through a affordable housing project from start to finish, the funding, the development process, the permitting process, the code requirement, blah, blah, blah. I know that all that takes so much time, and I just wonder if going over a project like that will help create a baseline for us as we contemplate other projects.
That's awesome. So we had talked about this last year of doing it in multiple ways, but maybe we actually dedicate some board time to it. So we talked about this last year, Jeff. We talked about potentially, having people meet with HCI staff 2 at a time. But if there's enough interest from the whole board, then maybe we you're a busy board. I'm just gonna tell you right now, you all have lots of work. It starts getting busy once you start seeing applications, not just the human services, but the housing ones as well, which will be coming up. But that doesn't mean we can't potentially find some time, at least to provide a high level overview of that whole affordable housing process. I think that's something we can talk to Molly and Christina about, Brenda, and maybe, add it to this. If there's enough interest for the whole board, then that's something I think we consider doing. Any other thoughts on that? Would other folks be interested in that?
Yeah, I'd be interested.
You'd be interested? Okay. All
Yeah,
right, so
me
we'll
too.
add it.
Me
Okay.
too.
Great.
Definitely.
Okay, we'll add it to the work plan, and we'll talk to Molly and her team about putting it, we'll look. Like, if you look at the work plan, there's a lot of stuff, right? There's There's quite a bit of stuff, but if the board's interested, then yeah, we can look for it. Alejandro.
Yeah, I think that'll probably help us when it comes down to the application process, right? Because what we're gonna be looking at application wise is gonna be from developers, right? Not people.
That's a good question. Not necessarily always developers. Sometimes, like, I think, was it 2 years ago? I'm trying to remember. 2 years ago, Imagine came to us, to this board, to talk about some affordable housing funding or CBDG funding to renovate some of their smart homes. Do you all know what smart homes are? So smart homes are they're homes that were built in Longmont, and they're really meant to support people with intellectual development I'm struggling, intellectual development issues, right? And so they had all of these added accessories and things to help folks with IDD issues to be able, and so I think, was it 2 years ago? I think that they came and asked for some funding for restrooms. So it's not just developers, it's also, I think this board also funded some housing financial classes as well. So yeah, it's not gonna be just developers, but there may be some developers too. Like, I think we funded Habitat for some of their housing costs or their building costs, and the in-between as well. We have funded them as well as they built new units. Graham.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that yeah, nonprofits ask for funding, and then the county will ask for funding to remodel or maintain permanently affordable units. And yeah, I think looking at affordable housing through the lens of the funding types is probably the most profitable training we could probably do, because there's so many different types of dollars that feed into affordable housing, and I think for me that makes the most sense, and because it's not the same type of applicant each time, it totally depends on the kind of money they're looking for, and yeah, so it's nonprofits and developers and a whole variety of folks involved in the issue.
We don't know what the cycle's gonna bring, right? So Molly and her team put the applications out, and we don't know until they come to us, right? So yeah, it does run the gamut. All right, so we'll talk to Christina and Molly about adding that to the work plan. Now you've had a chance to look at the work plan, any questions on the current work plan, or do you need more clarification on it, on any item in the work plan? Cause yeah, we're gonna be asking for a vote next month. This is where we really wanna get this finalized and get it out, make sure that the board is okay with it.
You ain't kidding. We're a busy board.
Yeah, this is a busy board. This has been one of the busiest boards that I've ever worked with. And I sit on the Longmont Community Foundation board.
And it seems like we just petition for more work every single meeting.
Yeah, no, this is a heavy duty advisory board. You all do a lot of wonderful work. So we definitely appreciate your time. All right, so next month we will be asking for a vote to accept the work plan for you all. And I will talk between here and then I'll talk to Molly and Christina about a training. Okay, all right. All right, next topic, and I wish Crystal was here because she was one of the ones that we had a really good conversation in January about site visits. And Brenda and I have talked, and we have a compromise solution to share with you all. If you all don't think it's the right one, we can always go back to the drawing board if you're guided. So I'm gonna review the things that we talked about in January, right? So there's about 3 or 4 ideas thrown out there, right? So one was to have folks come here. I think that's, as you can see your work plan, I think that's gonna be challenging, right? Your work, you all have a lot of work. Then there was a desire for, to have multiple site visits on one day. And just go there, just take that one day and do multiple site visits. And then there's a desire, or a recognition that, maybe we we do things how we have done them, but we look at other options for engagement with our nonprofits, and we have an idea that came out of the lean process that we'll talk about here. So I think the compromise that Brenda and I are gonna ask the board to consider, and again, we'll just ask for your guidance, is I think we talked about this, and I think that it makes sense to do, you know, a little bit of both, some more traditional site visits, where you know, we do them like we have, where I invite board members to come and people can sign up for those that can make it. And then we do we take the bolder ones, the bolder specific ones, so I wanna point out, so like the public health one, they're in Boulder. Boulder Valley Women's Health is in Boulder. EFA, Emergency Family Assistance is in Boulder. Like we take some of those and say, all right, we're gonna have a day out in Boulder. And I'd be happy whoever wants to come, I can get us a city vehicle and we take that day and, you know, we head out that way. We just gotta figure out about the notice and stuff if I have more than 2 of you. So I think that's the compromise, that we do some of them more traditionally and we do some of the bolder ones in one day. Any thoughts on that?
Who buys the snacks?
I will talk to Christina about that.
And so I know you brought up the concern of the impact on some of the nonprofits if it does have to be public record. Do you think that will still pose a challenge?
We will have conversations with them about it, right? So, I mean, I think the only folks that may struggle with it is potentially, you know, the health center. You know, they might be like, well, this is a medical site, and so, you know, that may be a concern, right? Because there's patient privacy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, public health is a county agency, so they understand the idea of it being open to the public, right?
Yeah, I would be concerned about the women's health center because that's a pretty sensitive.
Exactly.
Population.
Yeah, so we and if we take that into consideration, we could do potentially, in the farmer's market, their main office is also in Boulder, right? Cultivate is in Gun Barrel, so Voices for Children is in Gun Barrel. Immigrant Legal Center, that could be also another potentially sensitive population, because they're in Boulder too. So we'll figure out which is best, and then we'll send an email that you can all respond to Brenda about. We're gonna work on the day, whoever wants to come, let Brenda know. Does that sound like a way to go forward?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, anybody else, any other thoughts? Let's see a chat, hold on, Graham, go ahead, see a couple of chats.
No, it's a misfire, sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the DV shelter, we would be very careful about that.
I guess the question I had, you have some doubts on some of these nonprofit organizations. Some of you might see they do well and others maybe not so well, or do you categorize that?
So that's a great question. So the ones in red, let me talk about the ones in red. Are agencies that we are funding for the first time. And that's why we're doing a site visit. So that's a really good question. Do I have doubts? It's too early to tell, right? Because this is the first time funding. Some of our other ones, you know, they've been around. I think that, you know, I mean, I'm always interested in learning how they are achieving their goals and how they're, you know, how they are serving. I wouldn't say doubts, I would say more just a genuine curiosity around, you know, how they serve in Longmont, you know. But the ones in red, it's the first time being funded by this group, and that's why they're getting site visits. And so you can see that compared, I want to scroll down so you can see, like, in 2022, we had quite a bit of in red. We had only 2 in 2021. only 3 in 2023, but we have quite a bit in 2024. You know, and you know who's not on here that needs to be on here? True Care. True Care is not on there. They're a new agency. We need to have True Care. Yeah. Now that being said, True Care has been around for many, many years. I've known about them for a long time. They provide hospice services. But they're not on this list and they need to be because they're a new agency.
So they've all notified you they're gonna apply, but the application deadline hasn't arrived yet. So
Well, these are agencies that this board just recommended for funding for the first time.
For this year.
Oh,
So
okay.
these are all funded agencies. We won't do a site visit on an agency that's not funded by us.
The decision's already been made, they're getting money.
Right, and now we're gonna go,
Check it out.
we're just gonna
Okay.
go get a little deeper dive because they're new and we wanna learn more about their program.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah,
So I had a question, I'm looking at 23, 24. I mean, some places like Mental Health Partners and In Between and the R Center, they didn't apply again for 2020.
so we don't site visit every year, so let me talk about that, so they're on a 3-year cycle. So yeah, they're on a 3-year cycle, so you know, you can see, so we did a site visit with Farmers Market in 2021, it's been 3 years. We could change that site, we don't have to have that conversation tonight, but potentially this board could say, you know, 3 years is too soon, we're overburdening the agencies, can we make it 5 years or whatever? We could potentially have that conversation at some point. But right now they're on a 3-year cycle, every 3 years they get a site visit. Unless they're new, then we do a site visit, but the new folks won't get another site visit for 3 years. So, for example, Boulder Lake won't be visited again until 2027. If they're still applying or still receiving funding. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. All right, so I think we're gonna go ahead and do that compromise, and Brenda and I will add the conversation about who we should or shouldn't, you know, to make sure that we are careful and thoughtful about populations. All right, thank you. Okay, you can go back all the way to 2017 that we've been doing. All right, and so here, yeah, this is just, you have this in your packet, this is kind of the list, and again, we need to add True Care as well to that. Alejandro,
I saw, can you go back to the original list up there?
Yes,
The
sir.
site visits,
Yeah.
okay,
you want to stop at a certain place?
just keep going up to the new ones. Okay,
Okay.
right there. So I would volunteer to go to the Immigrant Legal Center and
Yeah, we could do that more,
do
there's no one yet.
do like a report on them and bring it back
Sure.
to the board. I need to
Yeah.
speak to as many of these immigrant legal centers type of places. So that would kind of, you know, kill 2 birds with 1 stone for me.
Yeah, well, just, if you have, so if you have folks you want to see, connect with Brenda and let her know.
So I can add them to the list.
Yeah,
And I'll send out this updated list and ask for, you know, which ones you would like to be participating in. And then set a schedule.
yeah, so just, if there's some that you all are interested in doing, just connect with Brenda.
What's up to the generations and genetics?
So these are,
This is what's.
that's an interesting, those are 2 programs that were funded this year. The history behind those programs, these are meant for teen parents and the families of teen parents. And in the past, they were funded by our Children, Youth and Family, but you know, there was a decision was made to ask them to look for other funding, and so they applied to us for that. So the city has funded them for many years, but they weren't funded through this process.
And Genesis is directly for teen parents and Generations is for siblings of teen parents to.
Right, to help them, to protect them, to help them provide services so they don't become teen parents. Okay,
This, yeah,
any other questions on the site visits?
my wealth being.
That's a new agency that you all decided to you know, it was to be funded, and that's really. They could also actually apply for CBDG funding, cause they are a financial literacy type of program. So they're in that self-sufficiency realm. But they're pretty new, they've only been around for about a year. Typically, you know, I found it interesting, the board scored them so well, typically new agencies that have been only around don't typically get funded. But I think because of the fact that they are very much engaged in working with people of color. And, you know, I think that the board decided, you know, the board members who reviewed that organization really appreciated that, and they're led by people of color. I'm assuming that's why they scored so well and were funded. Because yeah, typically this board does not fund newer agencies. But they're a pretty new agency with only about a year under their belts. Same thing with community midwives, that's a newer agency too. So yeah, this board's kind of, you know, you're all a little more risk takers in funding newer agencies. In the past, this board did not typically fund new agencies. We kind of waited for a few years of success before we decided to fund them.
We're cutting edge.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I thought that was interesting that we funded some newer agencies, which in the past we have not. We waited, like I said, a few years to make sure that they were sustainable and that they would be able to deliver what they say. So, but that's all right. That's right. That's why we have a formulaic process where you all get to score, and your scores make a difference. So.
I guess the last two red ones, Project Angel Heart and Rocky Mountain Nature Center,
So Project Angel Heart has been around for a long time throughout the state, but they most recently came to Longmont. What they do is they provide medically tailored meals, right? So you have Longmont Meals on Wheels, right? That does a great job delivering, you know, healthy meals to folks. Project Angel Heart will work with people who have come out of some sort of medical center, hospital, whatever situation, and they will provide meals that are tailored to their medically required diet. So they're a little newer to us, but they have been around in the state for a long time. They're a pretty big agency. I've known of Rocky because I used to work countywide, and I've known about Rocky Mountain Legal Center for a long time. They are very much like, you know, Bridge to Justice and Boulder County, but they primarily have served in the East County, Lafayette area, but they do serve Longmont folks. And so they've been applying for a while, and this is the first time they got funding. But they provide legal services like post decree stuff, estate planning, you know, just legal services.
everything.
I don't think they do criminal.
Oh, okay.
I think they do a lot of civil stuff. Civil. Yeah, but I do not think they represent criminally. So, yeah. All right, any other questions or thoughts on this? Okay, thank you all for the direction, and we will continue to work on it and bring it back. The next topic is the so in our January meeting, this board approved, you know, creating a task force, and Graham, Martha, Catherine, and Crystal volunteered. And we actually met on, when did we meet?
25th.
25th, at a great meeting. It should be on YouTube pretty soon if it's not already on there. You can always go on YouTube and see our conversation. I thought it was very productive. And so the a technical thing is I had a meeting with the city clerk, and this really should have come as a memo from the task force, not in minutes to the board. It should have come as, so we will need the board to accept this as a memo. So that we'll take a vote on this. And these are the recommendations. I sent it to the task force for any comments. I didn't receive any back, so I think that that I've captured them as accurately as possible. Again, you can always go back and see the video, it's online. So I think, you know, as we have this conversation with our collaborative partners, I also did send it to our collaborative partners as well. I think the big recommendation, number one, is I think the task force as a whole appreciated the racial equity and diversion, I said that wrong, racial equity, diversity and inclusion work that the county did. And task force, please feel free to jump in throughout this if you have any other comments. They would like that we use that as well. This first time it was piloted by Boulder County and only Boulder County staff reviewed the answers. We did not, and you could see it, but it was not evaluated by this board. And so that will mean that we gotta take a look at the evaluation and modify it to incorporate that questionnaire. But I think the task force just felt that it provided a lot of great information that we should use in our evaluation of the agency applications. Go ahead, Alejandro.
So, am I safe to assume the reason why we're eliminating that question in number 2 is because it's redundant, because it's within the Boulder County racial equity?
That's exactly right.
Question.
That's exactly right.
Or-
That's exactly right, Alejandro. Yes.
And theirs was a whole lot more extensive than ours.
Right.
Yeah, I'm very well versed on it. So yeah, it made sense. Thanks for doing that. Martha being part of that.
Yeah.
Everybody
And
else.
so we're asking them to remove that second question because, yeah, they do much more extensive questions and then a much deeper dive in that questionnaire that Boulder County created. And then we want, I think a big piece of the conversation that we had as a task force was around a couple of things. One, continue to simplify language. I think that's I think that's number.
Yeah, C, 7C.
Yeah, I continue to simplify. There's a lot of commitment to simplify, to lower the number of characters. Right now, like some of these questions you can put up to 2,500, 5,000 characters, and I mean that's a lot to read for you all. So we want to make them more succinct. We want another piece too is we want to minimize the copy and paste piece of it, because sometimes that leads. Yeah,
that's horrible. And thank you, Catherine, Graham, and Crystal that isn't here now, but thank you so much for working on that task force. Thank you.
So we talked a lot about that. Yeah, just kind of removing questions that we thought weren't relevant. I think fundamentally that's what because we literally went through the entire application, in particular the program section, question by question as a task force. And we talked about, why is it important to keep this, or, what isn't as relevant and can we remove that? And so, I thought that the task force did a great job of being thoughtful and intentional as we read through the application. And so I think what we're asking tonight is just to accept this as a memo to the board. Because I'll tell you what I told the task force. Ultimately, we are part of a collaboration and we can make these recommendations, but we don't, it's a it's City of Boulder, it's Boulder County, and now City of Lafayette that make the final decision as a collaborative. That being said, I think that they were all excited to see our task force and the work that they did. To the point that on March 27th, so what's gonna happen next on the collaborative level is, because we did this work on March 27th, between here and March 27th, the county, City of Boulder and City of Lafayette are gonna go back to their respective committees that review applications and share ours, and also ask them for theirs to see if they have any recommendations. So probably in our April meeting, we'll come back to like, okay, so we met, we took everybody, everybody had a chance to share their thoughts, and here is our final application for us to look at. But again, ultimately, it's a choice not necessarily made by this board, even though you get to advise and add and recommend stuff. It's done by the collaborative. Does that make sense? Okay.
Are you asking for us to make a motion? To
Yeah, just
accept it?
as a memo to the board. Okay. Alejandro?
I move for that. Motion to
Second,
go.
I'll second.
Second,
All in favor? Keep your hands up, everybody. We can't see you.
All right.
Yeah, unanimous.
Unanimous. Okay. All right, well, that, again, thank you, task force, you know, it's been, we used the whole hour and a half, we didn't get done till. You know, last minute, it was a very good conversation, and I really appreciate the time and effort that the task force put into. You know, reading the application and coming up with ideas.
Thank you.
And then the next thing is, we just want to share, you know, and I go, Brenda, we don't want to go into a ton of detail, but we just want to share with you all. Some of the work that we've been doing with the lean process, and just give you guys some progress updates on it, and what's come out of it, because we told you in January that we were gonna start this process. And this is how this process works, you use all of these sticky notes and you put notes on there about the process and what needs to be done. And I just wanted to share a couple of the things that have come up, I'm gonna stop sharing so we can see everybody. You know, some of the changes or some of the things that we're looking at, I'll start with, one of the things that we came up with is removing Christina and myself outside of the evaluation process. Because as we looked at it, you know, because we're so involved in the evaluation process, it takes some of our capacity away to facilitate the process, right? Because we're so much ingrained in the process. So as we were having this conversation, so what we're gonna be doing now is we're gonna be looking for subject matter experts throughout the Human Services Department. So multiple staff to come and do, just like you all do, right? So they get to choose, or they work in the priority areas that is their specialty. And have them evaluate alongside you, and then have Christina and I be more resources to the process than be so ingrained in the process. So that's one thing that has come up. I think another thing that has come up that changed, again, yes, the application piece, March 27th, we're gonna meet to look at all the recommendations and all the different committees that evaluate and see how we can do it. And then this is what I was mentioning earlier about the logic model training. I think we are planning at this point on April 24th is the, I don't know what the word is, the tentative date. That we are gonna invite our nonprofits to come to, and we're gonna bring an outside subject matter expert to do a training on logic models. And I think we're gonna invite the board if they're available to come. And we can still do the one in June where I need it, but I think we're gonna potentially invite the board to come view it in April. It'll probably be just a couple of hours. But yeah, I think that's the other thing that came out of the lean process. Anything else, Brenda, that I'm missing?
Definitely the site visits, we took into consideration some of the
Oh, yeah.
recommendations.
Yeah, well, that came out of the lean process too. And we, you know, if anyone wants to take a closer look, we actually have the sheets right there. We continue to meet and update them. But yeah, so those are like 3 examples of what has come out of the lean process that we told you we would do. Oh, another thing that came out that we're gonna look at is the continued engagement with our nonprofits, and we're looking at breakfasts. And we'll invite you all as well, and we are planning, I think at least 3 this year.
One a quarter.
Yeah. So that came out of the lean process as well, and in particular, just looking at how do we continue to make us more effective and efficient at the same time, right? So we can't do the site visits here, what if we do these breakfasts where the board members that wanna come, that wanna learn? Let's say we do it, if you wanna review housing stability and we have a housing stability breakfast. You come to that and you get to meet the folks that apply for housing stability. Right, so we wanna do it here, but you come to a breakfast and and we do that, so.
Then also the opportunity that you'll have to be able to train, provide more training to the agencies, the nonprofit agencies and so forth.
Yeah,
That's nice networking too for those agencies.
correct.
That's great.
Yeah, so yeah, this lean processing has been really useful. Cause we just take a look at, so what are the processes and what are the gaps that we're missing and how do we build those gaps in efficient and effective ways, right? So we can't necessarily take a whole board meeting to do site visits, folks to come in and present, but what if we do a breakfast instead? And we have more of an organic situation for there to be networking and learning about nonprofits. So yeah, that's, just wanted to give the board an update on what we're doing.
Been working hard.
A lot of stuff.
I call Heriberto the machine. He's in everything.
There's a lot of stuff going on, so. Any questions or thoughts on the lean process? And again, if you all want to learn more about it, you know, Christina is our local expert on lean process. She's been certified for many years. I got certified, but I don't use it enough to, you know, to lead it like she does. She uses it a lot with a lot of different, in a multidisciplinary way. So. And that's all I had.
Any other announcements before we adjourn?
Well, new board members, welcome. I'm sorry I haven't met you all. I've been going through some stuff, so I'm glad to see new board members. I'm sorry my camera isn't working right now. But I hope to go in person, probably the next board meeting we have, so that I can shake your hand, say hello.
Thank you. I'll come in person too then, so you can shake my hand.
Hey, who would like to make a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
All right, I think you're ready. Okay. Thank you all. Have a good night. Appreciate your time. Have a.
Thank you. Good night.
One more.
Night.
There you go. And I want to.